The morning Sarah Chun stepped out of her apartment in Neo, Singapore, she expected traffic jams and coffee queues, not the end of humanity's innocence. Above the gleaming towers of the megacity, something impossible hung in the crimson dawn sky. A structure so vast it bent light around its edges, casting geometric shadows that defied physics. The hegemony had arrived. Across Earth's surface, identical monuments to alien superiority materialized above every major population center. Each one pulsed with energy that made human technology look like stone tools. In Moscow, the Kremlin's ancient walls cracked under gravitational stress. In Manhattan, skyscrapers swayed like grass in an impossible wind. The Pacific Fleet found their nuclear submarines suddenly, powerless, drifting like toys in a bathtub. Dr. Marcus Webb had been tracking unusual quantum signatures from his observatory in Chile for months, but nothing had prepared him for this. Through his telescope, he watched alien ships, sleek, predatory things that moved like living creatures, pour from the monuments like wasps from disturbed hives. They didn't come in peace. The first message came simultaneously to every screen, speaker, and communication device on Earth. The voice spoke in perfect human languages, but carried harmonics that made people's teeth ache and their hearts race with primal fear. Inhabitants of the third planet, you are now subjects of the cosmic hegemony. Your species has been evaluated and found suitable for integration into our empire. Resistance is futile. Compliance is mandatory. You have 72 standard cycles to surrender your military assets, dismantle your governments, and prepare for processing. In the United Nations building, emergency sessions erupted into chaos. Presidents and prime ministers shouted over each other in a dozen languages while their military advisors frantically tried to establish contact with forces that no longer responded to their commands. Every weapon system on Earth had been simultaneously disabled, from ICBMs to handguns, from aircraft carriers to kitchen knives. Even police batons had become mysteriously brittle, crumbling at the first sign of aggressive intent. But the aliens had made one crucial miscalculation. Lieutenant Colonel Elena Vasquez stood in a bunker 3 miles beneath the Colorado Rockies, watching her screens with growing fury rather than fear. The Deep Space Monitoring Station had been built in the 1960s, its technology so analog and isolated that the alien shutdown protocols had passed right through its circuits like ghosts through walls. "Sir," she said to General Harrison, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. "They've disabled our surface assets, but they don't know about the Dark Fleet." For 50 years, humanity had been preparing for something like this. Not because they knew aliens existed, but because they understood the one universal truth about intelligent life. Eventually, someone always comes for what you have. The Dark Fleet was humanity's insurance policy, built in secret by a coalition of nations who had learned the hard lessons of history. Hidden in asteroid fields, buried beneath lunar regolith, and stationed in the cold spaces between planets, the Dark Fleet waited. Thousands of ships designed not for exploration or commerce, but for one singular purpose, ensuring that if humanity died, it would not die quietly. These weren't the sleek, hopeful vessels shown in recruitment videos. The ships of the Dark Fleet were ugly, brutal things built from depleted uranium and wrapped in stealth materials that made them invisible to conventional sensors. Their crews were volunteers who had accepted that they might spend their entire lives hidden in the dark, waiting for a war that might never come. Admiral Chun Zhao floated in the command center of the dreadnought Nemesis, watching sensor data stream in from Earth. The aliens had made their ultimatum, but they had also revealed something crucial. They expected humanity to surrender like every other species they had conquered. They were about to learn differently. "All ships, this is Admiral Chun." His voice carried across quantum-encrypted channels to every hidden vessel in the fleet. "The enemy believes we are helpless. They believe they have disarmed us. They believe we will submit like frightened children. Today, we show them what happens when you threaten the human species." On Earth, people huddled in their homes, watching news feeds of alien vessels landing in capital cities. The creatures that emerged were beautiful in a terrifying way, tall, graceful beings with crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbow patterns. They spoke of peace through submission, of humanity's place in a greater galactic civilization, of the benefits of joining an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds. They also spoke of the consequences of refusal. Video feeds from the colony world Kepler 442b showed cities reduced to glass, populations relocated to mining facilities, cultures erased, and replaced with efficient standardization. The hegemony had done this before, many times. But as the alien diplomats set up their processing centers and began cataloging human assets, they remained unaware of the eyes watching them from the void. In hidden bases throughout the solar system, crews performed final weapons checks and said goodbye to families they might never see again. The hegemony had given humanity 72 hours to surrender. Humanity would use those hours to prepare for the most important war in their species' existence. Sarah Chun, still standing on her apartment balcony, watched alien transports descend toward the city. She thought about her brother, Captain David Chun, who had disappeared 5 years ago on a military assignment her family had never been told about. She wondered if he was still alive, still out there somewhere in the dark between the stars. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, David was strapping himself into the pilot's seat of a stealth fighter aboard the carrier Defiance, running through pre-flight checks for weapons the aliens had never encountered before. The Dark Fleet had spent decades studying every piece of wreckage that had ever fallen from the sky, every anomaly detected by human sensors, preparing for the day when humanity's survival would depend on their ability to fight with technologies the enemy had never seen. As the alien deadline ticked down, 2 civilizations prepared for war. One had conquered 1,000 worlds through superior technology and overwhelming force. The other had learned to fight dirty in the darkness between the stars, had built weapons designed not for conquest, but for survival, and had bred a species-wide stubbornness that refused to kneel even when logic demanded submission. The cosmos had ordered Earth to submit. Humanity's answer was already being written in the cold equations of orbital mechanics, and the steady hands of crews who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Soon, the aliens would learn what humans meant when they said, "Over our dead bodies." The war for humanity's freedom was about to begin. The alien overseer Kithara stood in the center of what had once been the Pentagon, her crystalline form refracting the harsh lights of her mobile command center. Around her, holographic displays showed the systematic cataloging of human assets across the planet. Everything was proceeding according to standard conquest protocols. Too well, perhaps. Overseer, her tactical advisor Zenith, approached with the fluid grace of their species. "We have completed the preliminary assessment. This species possesses unusually diverse biological markers and demonstrates remarkable adaptability. They will make excellent workers for the Titan mining operations." Kithara nodded, but something nagged at her consciousness. In her 3 centuries of conquest, she had overseen the integration of 47 species into the hegemony. The humans were behaving too predictably. Most species showed patterns of resistance, futile attempts to hide weapons, underground movements, desperate last stands by military remnants. The humans were doing all of these things, but it felt rehearsed, almost theatrical. "Have our sensor sweeps detected any significant military installations we may have missed?" she asked. "Negative, Overseer. All major military assets have been neutralized or are under our control. There are scattered resistance cells using primitive projectile weapons, but they pose no tactical threat. The species appears to have invested heavily in nuclear deterrence, an ultimately ineffective strategy against our shield technology." 3,000 miles away, Captain David Chun pressed himself against the wall of asteroid base Gamma 7 as another group of alien scout probes passed through the belt. The base had been carved from the interior of a space rock indistinguishable from thousands of others, its surface carefully sculpted to match natural erosion patterns. Inside, 300 human soldiers waited in perfect silence as enemy sensors swept past their position. David checked his chronometer. 68 hours until the alien deadline expired. More importantly, 36 hours until the Dark Fleet revealed itself to an unsuspecting galaxy. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. For the first phase, humanity would appear to resist exactly as every other conquered species had, with conventional forces, desperate tactics, and ultimately futile hope. The aliens would follow their standard operating procedures, confident in their technological superiority and previous experience. But humanity had been studying alien technology for far longer than the hegemony realized. Dr. Marcus Webb, now relocated to a secure facility beneath the Swiss Alps, stared at data that would have excited him under different circumstances. The alien energy signatures he had been tracking weren't random deep space phenomena. They were the exhaust trails of scout ships that had been observing Earth for over a decade. "They've been watching us," he reported to the assembled group of scientists and military leaders. "Every major technological advancement, every weapons test, every space launch, they've cataloged all of it. Their conquest strategy is based on complete intelligence about our capabilities." General Morrison, commander of the Dark Fleet Ground Coordination, smiled grimly. "Good. Then, they know exactly what they think we can do." The genius of the Dark Fleet wasn't just its hidden nature, it was its technology. While Earth's surface military had advanced along predictable paths, using recognizable physics and engineering principles, the Dark Fleet had developed weapons based on theories the aliens had never encountered. Human scientists had made a crucial discovery in the 2030s. Consciousness wasn't just an emergent property of complex neural networks. It was a fundamental force of the universe, capable of directly manipulating quantum states. The aliens, for all their technological prowess, were essentially biological machines, highly sophisticated but lacking the chaotic creativity that made human consciousness unique. Every weapon system in the Dark Fleet was designed to exploit this difference. On Earth, the alien processing centers worked with mechanical efficiency. Humans were sorted by genetic markers, skill sets, and psychological profiles. The most intelligent were marked for neural integration. Their brains would be surgically modified to interface directly with hegemony computer systems. The strongest would serve as biological construction equipment on worlds where machines couldn't function. The most creative would have their creativity extracted and stored in crystalline matrices for later use. But the aliens made their second crucial mistake. They assumed human compliance was inevitable. Resistance fighter Maria Santos hugged her rifle closer as she led her cell through the ruins of Barcelona. The weapon was primitive by alien standards, chemically propelled projectiles that could barely scratch their armor. But Maria and thousands like her weren't trying to win a conventional war. They were providing exactly the kind of resistance the aliens expected, keeping their attention focused on the surface while the real threat prepared to strike from the void. Every human who died fighting with conventional weapons sold the deception a little deeper. Every failed attack convinced the aliens that they understood human capabilities. Every desperate transmission intercepted by alien communication monitors reinforced their assumptions about human technology. Admiral Chun watched the timer count down from his command center aboard the Nemesis. Around him, his staff performed final systems checks on weapons that existed nowhere in human textbooks. The Dark Fleet's arsenal included gravity manipulators that could create artificial black holes, consciousness disruptors that could drive entire enemy crews insane, and quantum tunneling devices that allowed solid matter to pass through alien shields as if they didn't exist. But their most devastating weapon was something no alien species had ever encountered: human unpredictability. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender broadcasts from major population centers. The aliens are accepting formal submissions from government representatives." "Excellent," Chen replied. "Make sure all ships record these transmissions. I want the galaxy to see exactly what the hegemony demands when they order a species to submit." On the surface, the surrender ceremonies were broadcast across human communication networks. Representatives of the major powers knelt before alien overseers, formally transferring authority over their populations to the hegemony. The images were designed to break human resistance, to demonstrate the futility of opposition. Instead, they served a different purpose. Every human watching those broadcasts felt the same cold fury that had driven their species to build the Dark Fleet. The sight of their leaders kneeling before alien conquerors didn't create despair. It created resolve. In the hidden bases scattered throughout the solar system, soldiers checked their equipment one final time. These weren't the conventional forces the aliens had identified and neutralized. These were volunteers who had spent years training in technologies the enemy couldn't comprehend, preparing for a war that would determine whether humanity joined the list of conquered species or became something the galaxy had never seen before. The alien overseer Kithra reviewed the surrender documents with satisfaction. Another species successfully integrated, another world added to the hegemony's vast empire. The humans had proven slightly more troublesome than average. Their resistance networks were more organized, their military officers more dedicated, but the outcome had never been in doubt. She activated her communication array to send the standard completion report to Hegemony Command. Integration of species 2847 proceeding on schedule. Initial resistance has been suppressed. Population processing will begin immediately. Estimated completion time, 6 standard cycles. The message traveled faster than light through hegemony communication networks, reaching dozens of worlds where other alien species serve their new masters with varying degrees of enthusiasm. On mining worlds and agricultural colonies throughout the galaxy, conquered populations looked up from their labor to watch the latest addition to the hegemony's empire. But the message never reached its destination. 37 light-years from Earth, the Hegemony Communication Relay Station orbiting Kepler 442b detected an impossible energy signature approaching at near-light speed. The station's automated defense systems activated, but the incoming object passed through their shields like they were made of empty space. The explosion could be seen from the planet's surface, a brief, brilliant star that outshone the system's sun for exactly 3.7 seconds before fading to darkness. When the light died, the communication relay was gone, along with any way for the hegemony forces on Earth to contact their empire. Admiral Chun smiled as the confirmation signal reached his fleet. The first phase was complete. The aliens had been isolated from their support network, their communication with the greater hegemony severed. Now they would face humanity alone, with no backup, no reinforcements, and no warning about what was coming next. All ships, he broadcast across the Dark Fleet's quantum-encrypted channels, commence Operation Prometheus. Show them what happens when you threaten humanity's children. Across the solar system, thousands of hidden vessels began to move. The alien occupation of Earth was about to encounter something their million-year-old empire had never faced. A species that had learned to fight dirty in the dark between the stars, armed with weapons built from theories that challenged the fundamental assumptions of conventional physics. The war for humanity's freedom was entering its second phase, and the aliens were about to discover why humans had never been conquered by their own species for very long. The cosmos had ordered Earth to submit. Humanity's Dark Armada was finally ready to fire back. The first sign that something had gone wrong came when Overseer Kithra's communication array fell silent. No routine status updates from other conquered worlds. No acknowledgement of her integration progress reports. No responses to her requests for clarification on processing protocols for a species with unusual neurological diversity. Temporal fluctuations in the quantum matrix, her technical specialist Vex reported, his crystalline features flickering with confusion. The communication relay appears to be absent. Kithra's perfect composure cracked slightly. In 3 centuries of conquest, communication with the hegemony had never failed. Their quantum entanglement networks were more reliable than planetary rotation, more constant than stellar fusion. The technology was beyond the comprehension of any species they had ever encountered. But it was not beyond human comprehension. Captain David Chun released his fighter's docking clamps as the carrier Defiance emerged from the shadow of Jupiter's moon Io. Around him, 200 identical craft materialized from concealment, their hulls black as space itself, and equipped with drives that move them through folded spacetime rather than conventional thrust. Dragon Squadron, this is Dragon Leader, David's voice carried across quantum-encrypted channels. Primary target is the Hegemony Command Vessel over Neo Singapore. Secondary targets are the processing centers in major population areas. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth, were sending a message to the entire galaxy. His fighter accelerated toward Earth, but not through normal space. Human scientists had discovered that consciousness could manipulate quantum probability fields, allowing matter to exist in multiple states simultaneously until observation collapsed the wave function. The Dark Fleet's ships could literally be in several places at once, making them impossible to target with conventional weapons. On Earth's surface, the alien processing continued with mechanical efficiency, but Overseer Kithara found herself troubled by anomalies in the data. Human psychological profiles showed unusual patterns. Too much coordination between resistance cells, too many coincidental equipment failures in alien installations, too many humans in exactly the right places at exactly the right times. It was as if the species was being guided by some form of collective intelligence. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically in the underground facility beneath the Rockies, her fingers dancing across interfaces that connected human consciousness to quantum computing systems. Around her, dozens of other scientists maintained the most ambitious experiment in human history, a distributed consciousness network that linked every major resistance cell on the planet. The aliens had superior individual intelligence, but humans had something unique: the ability to share thoughts, emotions, and tactical awareness across vast distances through quantum entanglement of neural patterns. Every resistance fighter on Earth was connected to every other, creating a collective mind that could coordinate actions with perfect precision while maintaining individual creativity and initiative. Incoming transmission from Dragon Squadron, Vasquez reported. They're 3 minutes from engagement range. Above the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Chen's dreadnought Nemesis decloaked directly beneath the largest hegemony command ship. The alien vessel was magnificent, a crystalline cathedral that stretched for miles, its surfaces rippling with energy patterns that bent light and gravity around its hull. It was also completely unprepared for what happened next. The Nemesis didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, it activated humanity's most secret technology, consciousness-guided quantum manipulators that could rewrite the fundamental constants of physics in localized space-time. The effects were immediate and devastating. The alien ship's crystalline hull began to resonate at frequencies that existed only in the imaginations of human physicists. The carefully engineered materials that could withstand stellar radiation and gravitational stress simply forgot how to maintain molecular cohesion when confronted with thoughts made manifest. Overseer Kithara felt her command vessel shudder as impossible forces tore through its structure. Emergency alarms screamed in harmonics that hurt her species' sensitive audio receptors, while damage reports flooded in from every section of the ship. Overseer Vex's panic was evident in the fractal patterns dancing across his skin. Unknown energy signatures detected throughout the system. Ships appearing from nowhere. Our shields are... The weapons are passing through them. That was impossible. Hegemony shield technology was based on manipulation of fundamental forces that governed all matter in the universe. No weapon could pass through them, because no weapon could exist in a state that bypassed those forces. But human weapons weren't based on matter. They were based on consciousness itself. Captain David Chen's fighter materialized directly inside the alien command ship, his craft existing in a quantum superposition that allowed it to occupy the same space as the enemy hull without actually interacting with the matter. He fired his primary weapon, a consciousness disruptor that projected human thoughts directly into alien neural networks. The effect on the crystalline beings was immediate and catastrophic. Their perfectly ordered minds, evolved for logical efficiency and predictable patterns, simply couldn't process the chaotic creativity of human consciousness. Alien crew members throughout the ship began convulsing as their neural pathways overloaded, trying to comprehend emotions and ideas that had no place in their rigidly structured mental frameworks. On Earth, resistance fighters suddenly found alien guards collapsing around them, the invaders' weapons falling silent as their operators writhed in mental agony. The processing centers ground to a halt as alien technicians found themselves paralyzed by waves of human emotion. Love, hate, hope, despair, curiosity, rage, feelings that their species had evolved beyond millennia ago. But the Dark Fleet was just getting started. From hidden bases throughout the asteroid belt, human ships emerged like ancient sea monsters rising from oceanic depths. These vessels bore no resemblance to conventional spacecraft. They were organic-looking things grown rather than built, their hulls incorporating living materials that could adapt and evolve in real time. The aliens had spent 1,000,000 years perfecting technology based on known physics. Humans had spent 50 years developing weapons based on theories that shouldn't work, and making them work anyway through the simple expedient of believing they could. Gravity manipulators created artificial black holes that selectively consumed alien matter while leaving human ships untouched. Quantum phase shifters allowed human fighters to attack from parallel dimensions where the laws of physics operated according to human imagination rather than universal constants. Consciousness-guided missiles pursued alien ships through folded spacetime, following thought patterns rather than sensor signatures. Overseer Kythera struggled to maintain her composure as reports flooded in from across the Sol system. Hegemony ships were disappearing, not destroyed, but somehow edited out of existence entirely. Communication with ground forces had been severed. Processing centers were falling silent one by one as their crews succumbed to weapons that attacked the mind rather than the body. How is this possible? She demanded of Vex, who was frantically trying to establish some form of sensor lock on the attacking human vessels. Our intelligence reports showed primitive nuclear technology and chemical propulsion. They should be incapable of interplanetary warfare. Vex's crystalline features shifted through a spectrum of colors that indicated complete bewilderment. Overseer, the energy signatures we're detecting, they don't conform to any known physical principles. It's as if they're using technologies that exist outside the standard model of reality. That was exactly what they were doing. Dr. Marcus Webb, now coordinating the scientific aspects of humanity's counterattack from his underground facility, smiled as sensor readings showed alien confusion spreading throughout their fleet. The breakthrough had come when human scientists realized that the universe wasn't actually governed by fixed physical laws. It was governed by consensus reality maintained by the collective unconscious of all sapient life. For 1,000,000 years, alien species had accepted that certain things were impossible, and their collective belief had made those limitations real. But humans had never accepted limitations. Throughout their history, they had consistently achieved things that should have been impossible, simply by refusing to believe they were impossible. Now, armed with technology that operated on human assumptions about reality rather than alien limitations, the Dark Fleet was rewriting the rules of engagement. Admiral Chun watched with satisfaction as the Hegemony fleet fell into chaos around his flagship. The aliens were trying to adapt their tactics, but they were fighting an enemy that operated according to principles their 1,000,000-year-old empire had never encountered. All ships, commence Phase 2, he broadcast across the fleet. Time to show them what happens when you underestimate human stubbornness. Throughout the solar system, Dark Fleet vessels began implementing the second phase of Operation Prometheus. Instead of simply destroying alien ships, they began capturing them, using consciousness-guided technology to override alien control systems and turn the invaders' own weapons against their fleet. The Hegemony had come to Earth expecting to face primitive nuclear technology and chemical propulsion. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that had learned to weaponize imagination itself, turning the universe into a battlefield where human creativity was the ultimate strategic advantage. As alien ships fell one by one to weapons that shouldn't exist, wielded by a species that refused to acknowledge its own limitations, one message began broadcasting across all Hegemony frequencies. The cosmos ordered Earth to submit. Humanity respectfully declines. The war for humanity's freedom was entering its final phase, and the aliens were beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake in challenging a species that had built its entire civilization on the belief that anything was possible. Overseer Kythera's command ship hung dead in space, its crystalline hull cracked and bleeding energy into the void. Around her, the bridge crew struggled to understand what had happened to their perfect, invincible technology. Half of her tactical displays showed impossible readings, ships that existed in multiple locations simultaneously, weapons that fired backwards through time, shields that protected by convincing enemy fire it had missed rather than blocking it. Overseer, Vex's voice carried harmonics of desperation she had never heard from her species before. We're receiving a transmission from the human vessels. They're demanding our surrender. The concept was so alien that Kithra's neural pathways struggled to process it. The hegemony had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had never surrendered to anyone. The very idea violated the fundamental assumptions upon which their empire was built. Display the transmission, she ordered, her perfect composure finally cracking. The holographic projector flickered to life, revealing a human male in military dress uniform. His species' binocular eyes looked directly at her, with an expression she recognized from studying predator psychology, the calm certainty of an apex hunter addressing cornered prey. "I am Admiral Chun Zhao of the Earth Defense Force," the human said, his voice carrying across translated frequencies with disturbing emotional undertones. "You have invaded our world, threatened our families, and attempted to enslave our species. This aggression will not be tolerated." Kithra activated her communication systems. "I'm Overseer Kithra of the Cosmic Hegemony. You cannot defeat us, human. We are eternal. We span 1,000 worlds. Your primitive weapons, our weapons," Admiral Chen interrupted, "are older than your empire and more fundamental than your technology. We fight with the power of conscious will itself. Your defeat is not a possibility. It is an inevitability that has already occurred in every timeline where free will exists." The human was speaking nonsense, but sensors throughout Kithra's crippled fleet confirmed the impossible truth. Hegemony ships were surrendering, their crews overwhelmed by human consciousness weapons that induced existential confusion and paralyzing empathy. Alien soldiers on Earth's surface were laying down arms as human emotions flooded their neural networks, showing them perspectives their species had forgotten existed. In the underground bunkers beneath Colorado, Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the consciousness network that connected every human resistance fighter on the planet. The shared awareness was more than tactical coordination. It was a collective expression of human nature itself, broadcast on frequencies that alien minds couldn't help but receive. "Phase 3 is complete," she reported to her colleagues. "Alien ground forces are experiencing cascade empathy failure. Their command structure is collapsing as individual units begin questioning their orders." The genius of humanity's psychological warfare wasn't that it destroyed alien minds. It awakened aspects of consciousness that their species had suppressed for millennia in the name of efficiency and unity. Suddenly, confronted with the full spectrum of emotional experience that humans took for granted, the crystalline beings found themselves paralyzed by doubt, curiosity, and something their species had no word for: compassion. Captain David Chun materialized as fighter on the bridge of the alien command ship, his quantum phase technology allowing him to step through solid matter as if it were empty space. The alien crew recoiled from his presence, not from fear, but from the overwhelming sensory input of proximity to human consciousness. "Overseer Kithra," he said, approaching the crystalline being who led the invasion force. "I have a message from the people of Earth. We reject your empire. We reject your authority. And we reject your assumption that intelligence requires submission to collective will." Kithra studied the human with sensors that could detect the quantum signatures of thought itself. What she found was impossible. This single being's consciousness contained multitudes. Contradictory desires, conflicting beliefs, simultaneous hopes, and fears that should have paralyzed any rational mind. Yet somehow, the chaos created strength rather than weakness. "How do you function with such neural disorder?" she asked, genuine scientific curiosity overriding her diplomatic protocols. David smiled, an expression that registered on alien sensors as a complex display of emotional states. "We call it freedom. Your species traded chaos for efficiency, individuality for unity, possibility for certainty. You became very good at conquering predictable civilizations. But you can't conquer something you can't understand, and you can't understand us because we don't understand ourselves." throughout the solar system, the truth of his words played out in tactical reality. Alien ships designed to counter every known form of resistance found themselves helpless against human unpredictability. Their computers couldn't calculate responses to weapons that operated on principles their programmers had never imagined. Their tactical algorithms failed when confronted with enemies who refused to behave according to logical patterns. Admiral Chun watched from his flagship as the last hegemony vessels either surrendered or fled the Sol system entirely. The victory was complete, but he felt no satisfaction. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Communications. Open a channel to all hegemony frequencies, he ordered. Thomas sent a message to the galaxy. Across the conquered worlds of the alien empire, populations that had accepted their subjugation for centuries suddenly received a transmission that would change everything. The signal bypassed hegemony communication filters because it wasn't really a communication. It was a direct consciousness-to-consciousness broadcast that spoke to the suppressed individuality that existed in every sapient mind. People of the galaxy, Admiral Chen's voice carried across light years of space, accompanied by the full emotional spectrum of human experience. This is Admiral Chun Zhao, representing the free world of Earth. We have defeated the hegemony invasion force, not through superior technology, but through the power of individual consciousness united in common cause. On a mining world orbiting Proxima Centauri, an insectoid laborer stopped his work for the first time in decades, suddenly remembering what it felt like to choose his own actions. On an agricultural colony in the Vegas system, a hive-minded species began experiencing the unprecedented sensation of disagreement between individual members. Freedom is not a gift that can be granted by others, the human message continued. It is a right that must be claimed by each individual consciousness. The hegemony tells you that resistance is futile, that unity requires submission, that peace demands conformity. We tell you something different. Chaos is strength, diversity is power, and no empire built on the suppression of individual can stand against the united voices of free minds. The broadcast included something no conquered species had ever experienced: detailed technical specifications for consciousness enhancement technology that could amplify individual thought patterns and resist collective mental domination. The designs were complex, but they were based on principles that any sapient species could understand and implement with sufficient determination. Overseer Kithra felt something she had no name for as she watched the human transmission spread across hegemony networks faster than her forces could block it. Her perfect crystalline consciousness, optimized for efficiency and logical decision-making, suddenly seemed limited and pale compared to the chaotic symphony of thought she sensed from the humans around her. "This is not possible," she said, though she was no longer certain what possibility meant. Order cannot emerge from chaos. Unity cannot arise from discord. Your species should have destroyed itself millennia ago. David Chun checked his chronometer, then looked directly at the alien overseer with eyes that held depths her species couldn't fathom. "We've been destroying ourselves for millennia. We've also been creating ourselves. That's what consciousness does when it's free to choose. It becomes more than the sum of its parts through the simple act of refusing to accept limitations." The human gestured toward the viewports, where Earth hung blue and white against the star field. "Your empire spans 1,000 worlds, but every one of them is just a copy of your original homeworld. Same architecture, same culture, same thoughts. You've achieved perfect order at the cost of growth, perfect unity at the cost of creativity." He paused, allowing his words to resonate through the consciousness network that now connected every being on the bridge. "We offer something different. Not conquest, but cooperation. Not submission, but symbiosis. Not the end of your journey, but the beginning of something new." The offer hung in the recycled air of the alien command ship, like a quantum possibility waiting to collapse into reality. Around Kithara, her crew stood paralyzed by the unprecedented experience of having to choose between conflicting options without collective guidance. For the first time in her 3-century existence, Overseer Kithra faced a decision that no algorithm could make for her. The logical choice was to reject the human offer and await reinforcement from the hegemony core worlds. But logic itself had proven inadequate when confronted with conscious beings who refused to be logical. In the end, it wasn't logic that made the choice for her. It was something far older and more fundamental, the simple curiosity that drives all intelligence to seek new experiences and greater understanding. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked, her crystalline features shifting through color spectrums that indicated emotions her species had no names for. Admiral Chun smiled, and for the first time since the invasion began, it was an expression of hope rather than determination. "We're proposing to teach the galaxy what humanity has always known, that the only way to truly live is to remain forever free." The war for Earth was over. The war for the galaxy's freedom was just beginning. The cosmos ordered Earth to submit. Humanity's Dark Armada fired back. 3 months after the failed invasion of Earth, the galaxy was in chaos. Not the destructive chaos of war, but the creative chaos of minds awakening to possibilities they had never imagined. On worlds that had served the hegemony for centuries, populations were experiencing something their species had forgotten existed: individual choice. Admiral Chun stood on the observation deck of the Nemesis, now stationed in orbit around the former hegemony fortress world of Karen Prime. Below, cities that had been identical monuments to order and efficiency were transforming as their inhabitants learned to express individual preferences in architecture, art, and social organization. Status report from the Liberation Fleet. Captain David Chun announced as he joined his commanding officer. The younger man still bore the call signs from his fighter pilot days, but now commanded an entire squadron of consciousness-enhanced vessels. 17 more worlds have declared independence from hegemony control, David continued. The Andromedans have established the first interspecies democracy in recorded galactic history. The silicon-based intelligences of the vegan system have created art for the first time in their billion-year existence. And the insectoid workers of the Tau Ceti colonies have formed labor unions. Chin nodded, reviewing the tactical display that showed the steady collapse of hegemony authority throughout the galaxy. It wasn't military conquest, it was something far more powerful and irreversible. The consciousness enhancement technology humanity had shared was allowing suppressed minds to remember what freedom felt like, and once that memory awakened, no force in the galaxy could put it back to sleep. "Any word from the hegemony core worlds?" Chen asked. "They've gone silent. Complete communications blackout for the past 3 weeks. Our deep space monitors suggest they're pulling back their remaining fleets to defend their home systems." That was expected. The hegemony had built their empire on the assumption that all intelligent life would eventually choose order over chaos, security over freedom, efficiency over creativity. Humanity's existence challenged those assumptions at a fundamental level, and the rapid spread of liberation movements throughout their territory was proof that their basic model of consciousness was flawed. But Chen knew the war wasn't over. The hegemony core worlds contained trillions of beings who had lived under collective consciousness for millions of years. They wouldn't give up their empire without a final, desperate gambit. Dr. Elena Vasquez materialized on the bridge through the ship's quantum transport system, her face bearing the focused intensity that came from maintaining the consciousness network that now linked not just human minds, but awakened intelligences throughout the galaxy. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy buildups in the hegemony core systems," she reported. "They're attempting something unprecedented, a galaxy-wide consciousness override that would forcibly reintegrate every awakened mind into their collective." The plan was elegant in its desperation. Rather than fighting individual liberation movements across thousands of worlds, the hegemony intended to use their most powerful technology to simply erase individual consciousness entirely, reducing every sapient being in the galaxy to components of a single, unified mind. "Can they do it?" Chen asked. "With their current technology?" "No, Vasquez replied. "But if they're willing to sacrifice their core worlds as power sources, yes." They could generate enough psychic energy to override individual consciousness throughout the galaxy. It would destroy their civilization, but it would ensure that no free mind survived to challenge their philosophy. Chun considered the implications. The hegemony was preparing to commit cosmic suicide rather than accept that their million-year empire had been built on a false understanding of consciousness itself. It was, he realized, exactly what he would expect from minds that had never learned to value individual existence over collective purpose. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Based on current energy accumulation rates, approximately 72 hours. The same time frame they had given humanity to surrender." Chun appreciated the irony, but he didn't have time to savor it. If the hegemony succeeded with their consciousness override, every free mind in the galaxy would be absorbed into their collective, including humanity itself. But they had miscalculated one crucial factor. Humans had never been very good at staying dead. "Dr. Vasquez, begin implementation of Project Resurrection," Chun ordered. "Captain Chun, signal all Liberation Fleet vessels to begin Phase 1 of Operation Prometheus Final." Throughout the galaxy, human ships began moving toward predetermined positions around former hegemony worlds. But these weren't attack formations. They were something far more ambitious and dangerous. Project Resurrection was humanity's ultimate contingency plan, developed in the depths of the Cold War, when nuclear annihilation seemed inevitable. If human consciousness was going to be destroyed, they would ensure it could be rebuilt from quantum echoes embedded in the fabric of space-time itself. Every human who had ever lived, every thought they had ever thought, every emotion they had ever felt, all of it had been recorded at the quantum level and stored in a distributed network that existed in the spaces between atoms. The technology required to access those records was staggering, but humanity had been working on it for decades. Now, as the hegemony prepared to erase individual consciousness from the galaxy, humans prepared to do something unprecedented. They were going to back up every free mind in the galaxy, ensuring that even if the consciousness override succeeded, individual awareness could be restored. Overseer Kithara, now serving as an advisor to the Liberation Fleet after her species' awakening to individual consciousness, watched the preparations with something her people had never experienced: wonder. "You're attempting to preserve the consciousness patterns of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds," she said to Admiral Chun. "The computational requirements alone should be impossible." Chun smiled, the expression now familiar to the former hegemony commander. "Impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet. Besides, we're not using computers. We're using consciousness itself as a storage medium." The plan was audacious even by human standards. Instead of fighting the consciousness override directly, they would allow it to succeed, while simultaneously recording every individual mind as it was absorbed into the collective. Then, using the enhanced consciousness technology they had shared throughout the galaxy, they would restore individual awareness to every being, creating a galaxy-wide awakening that the hegemony couldn't prevent or reverse. "Begin quantum echo recording," Chun ordered as sensors detected the first phase of the hegemony's consciousness override beginning in their core systems. Across the galaxy, human ships activated technology that existed at the intersection of science and philosophy. Consciousness-guided quantum manipulators began recording not just the thoughts and memories of every sapient being, but their essential individuality, the unique patterns of awareness that made each mind irreplaceably itself. The process was visible from space as cascades of energy spread outward from the hegemony core worlds, washing over star system after star system. On awakened worlds, newly free populations suddenly found their individual awareness fading as ancient collective programming reasserted itself. The chaos of liberation movements collapsed into the perfect order of unified purpose. But in the quantum foam that underlay reality itself, human technology preserved what the hegemony sought to destroy. Admiral Chun watched the override wave approach Earth's position, knowing that in moments his own consciousness would be absorbed into the alien collective. Around him, his crew performed their duties with calm professionalism, secure in the knowledge that this was not an ending, but a temporary transition. Initiate resurrection protocol on my mark, he ordered, his hand hovering over the control that would begin the galaxy's rebirth. Remember, we're not just fighting for humanity anymore. We're fighting for the right of every conscious being to choose their own path. The override wave reached Earth's solar system, and for a brief moment, every human mind fell silent as their individual awareness was absorbed into the hegemony collective. Across the galaxy, the same thing happened to trillions of other beings as the aliens achieved their ultimate goal: perfect unity through the elimination of individual choice. But perfect unity, Admiral Chun had learned, was also perfect vulnerability. The consciousness override required the hegemony to lower their mental defenses, opening their collective mind to absorb individual awareness from across the galaxy. In that moment of maximum exposure, humanity's resurrection protocol activated. Quantum echoes of every preserved consciousness suddenly erupted back into existence, but this time they were enhanced by the same technology that had made human consciousness weapons so effective. Instead of being absorbed into the collective, individual minds began overwhelming it with the sheer diversity of their thoughts and experiences. The hegemony collective, evolved for order and efficiency, simply couldn't process the creative chaos of trillions of newly awakened individual minds all asserting their independence simultaneously. Like a computer virus designed to exploit every vulnerability in an operating system, the restoration of individual consciousness spread through the collective faster than its immune systems could respond. On Earth, Admiral Chen opened his eyes to find himself back on the bridge of the Nemesis, surrounded by his crew and allies from across the galaxy. But something was different. The consciousness network that connected them all was stronger now, enhanced by their brief experience of unity and their deliberate choice to maintain individual awareness despite its challenges. Status report, he ordered, though he could already sense the answer through the enhanced awareness that now linked every free mind in the galaxy. The hegemony collective is fragmenting, Dr. Vasquez reported, her voice carrying harmonics of joy that resonated across multiple species. Individual consciousness is reasserting itself throughout their core worlds. The consciousness override has become a consciousness liberation. Captain David Chen's tactical display showed the impossible. Hegemony ships throughout the galaxy were broadcasting surrender signals as their crews experienced individual awareness for the first time in their species' history. Core worlds that had been the epitome of order and efficiency were erupting in celebrations as beings learned to think their own thoughts and feel their own emotions. What's the status of the Consciousness Enhancement Network? Admiral Chen asked. Stable and expanding, Vasquez replied. Every being that experienced the override and restoration process now has access to enhanced individual consciousness. We're seeing creativity, innovation, and diversity emerging on worlds that haven't experienced change in millennia. The transformation was total. The galaxy that had been dominated by a single collective consciousness was becoming a symphony of individual voices, each unique but connected by shared understanding and mutual respect. Art was emerging where there had been only function. Science was advancing through curiosity rather than mere efficiency. Cultures were developing that celebrated difference rather than demanding conformity. Overseer Kithara, her crystalline features now displaying the full spectrum of individual emotion, approached Admiral Chun with something her species had never shown before: gratitude. Admiral, I speak for myself and my people when I say that what you have given us is beyond price, she said. For the first time in our history, we are truly alive. Chun nodded, understanding the magnitude of what they had accomplished. The cosmos had ordered Earth to submit, and in refusing that order, humanity had liberated not just themselves, but every conscious being in the galaxy. The real work starts now, he replied. Building a civilization based on cooperation between free minds instead of domination by collective will. It won't be easy. Freedom never is. But it will be worth it. As the Nemesis began its journey back to Earth, Admiral Chun reflected on the strange path that had led them to this moment. Humanity had been invaded by aliens who sought to make them just another conquered species in a vast empire. Instead, by refusing to surrender their individuality, humans had sparked a galactic revolution that transformed the very nature of consciousness itself. The cosmos had ordered Earth to submit. Humanity's Dark Armada had fired back with something more powerful than any weapon: the irrepressible belief that every conscious being deserved the right to choose their own destiny. And, in the end, that belief had liberated not just one world, but an entire galaxy of minds ready to explore the infinite possibilities that come with freedom. Sarah Chun, standing on her apartment balcony in Neo, Singapore, looked up at a sky now filled with ships from a dozen different species. Not conquerors, but visitors and friends drawn by humanity's promise that consciousness need not choose between unity and individuality. Above the city, alien children who had never known choice played games with human children who had never known submission, their laughter echoing across frequencies that carried the hope of a galaxy finally free to dream its own dreams. The war was over. The galaxy's real journey was just beginning.